Iran's ability to take damage and inflict damage is on full display. Israel and the United States are carrying out relentless attacks from the skies. As the war drags on, we spoke with Aaron David Miller. He's a senior fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. We began by asking him whether the scope for diplomacy is left between Iran and the United States.
Right now, no, there's no room for diplomacy. The real question is, in the wake of this, whether or not there'll be opportunities. And right now, it's impossible to say. We really don't know whether or not, even if this phase of the war comes to an end, that is to say, the active and dynamic phase of American and Israeli efforts to undermine and destroy most of Iran's capacity to project its power abroad, not to mention to undermine the internal instruments of state power that has been used to repress Iranian citizens. We don't know whether the war is going to continue in a much reduced phase, but still active phase, with sanctions, black ops, cyber, assassinations of Iranian officials, Iranian responses in the Gulf, and occasionally military strikes.
Aaron also predicted what Trump's endgame in the Iranian war might be.
Look, I think the administration has wandered all over the parking lot with respect to what its war messaging is and what its objectives are. The president toggles back and forth between basically saying it's up to the Iranian people to decide, but then he talks about his role in choosing the next supreme leader. What we know for sure is that the objectives have been to weaken, if not decimate, for a very prolonged period of time, Iran's capacity to project its power abroad. Primarily its ballistic missiles, but also its command and control leadership targets. The killing of Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, regardless of what happens, is a transformative moment, because Iran will never be the same as it was over the past decade, since 1989, when he assumed the role of supreme leader in the wake of Khomeini's passing. So that leaves open all kinds of possibilities. So at a minimum, we're talking about undermining Iran's power projection. One piece here of this is important, and that is the presence of 900 pounds of highly enriched uranium at 60% contained in 18 to 20 scuba-like tanks. I think that this war will not be deemed a success without trying to figure out a way to deal with that material, whether that means special operations forces or at some point in negotiation to extract that material. I think the latter is unlikely.
We also asked Miller about his opinion on how long Iran can sustain such relentless damage from Israeli and U.S. attacks.
I think quite a bit. After all, people say this is the weakest point in Iran's history since the revolution. That is not true. The Iran-Iraq War was a much weaker point, where you had internal challenges, an external aggressor, and divisions within the establishment, the Iranian establishment. I think Iran can absorb an enormous amount of pain, in large part because there is no public pressure right now. This is not like the US, where there are constraints. I think the Iranian public's capacity to absorb pain and the fact that the regime seems to be determined, regardless of how much damage is done, to remain defiant, means this could go on for quite some time. And remember, in this part of the world, India knows well, geography is destiny. And the Gulf states are very vulnerable, even though they're increasingly dependent. Their proximity makes them vulnerable. So Iran has a way with very little deployment of its military power to cause big problems.
So is Iran up for a long-standing war with the United States and Israel? This is what Miller says.
Very good question. It's arguable now, even if Trump said we're going to stop tomorrow, whether the Iranians would comply. I mean, they have what they call horizontal escalation. They cannot match American or Israeli military power. And the Israelis and the Americans have escalation dominance over Iran. But horizontal escalation means that they can escalate over a broad theater by deploying limited amounts of power and doing an enormous amount of structural and psychological damage. That could go on for quite some time.
We also asked Miller if Trump's war on Iran is actually as a result of a pursuit by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
The notion that a clever Israeli prime minister forced Donald Trump into war is just wrong. Trump benefits as well from this, as he benefited in the June war by having an opportunity to strike Iran's nuclear sites without cost or consequence. And I guarantee you, if the war ended tomorrow, Trump would proudly proclaim that American military power has destroyed much of Iran's power projection and killed its supreme leader among many of its national security elites. So I don't think this war, frankly, is going to be a plus for Trump, though. The Republicans are going to sustain heavy losses in the midterms, and that was the case before the war.
Aaron Miller told us what role Russian President Vladimir Putin can play since he has offered to mediate between Iran and the United States.
I think the reports are he's supplying Iranians with real-time intelligence, number one. Number two, he's clearly benefiting from, I mean, look at the Trump administration is considering granting waivers on sanctions on Russian oil. This is an issue that affects India for sure. I think Putin benefits from the distraction that this war has caused from Ukraine. It benefits from the increase in oil prices. And I think Putin's main objective is to make sure that Donald Trump remains solidly in his corner.
We also asked Miller whether President Trump has been able to explain reasons of his war to Americans.
I think they really have failed in this regard. And I think that's very serious because let's be very clear. Regardless of the outcome of this war, this is a war of choice. It is not a war of necessity. And in a war of choice, the standards for success are much higher because the war presumably was sought out without a clear explanation as to whether or not American vital interests were at stake. What is the point of this war? And I think most people, the public polling suggests this has less support in the first 2 weeks than any war in American history.
And this is what he told us in response to a question on what could be the realistic off-ramp for Trump to end the war.
But I could write his talking points today on how he could end it tomorrow. Everyone would breathe a collective sigh of relief, assuming that the Iranians let him end it.